Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Andrew Cook is a seasoned business partner and owner with a diverse background encompassing 20 years of service in the U.S. Navy and a career in HR and operations since 2007, spanning nonprofit, for-profit, and government sectors. His primary passion centers on empowering small and micro businesses to excel by providing them with invaluable expertise and insights. Andrew is dedicated to offering a smarter way for business owners to access the experience they need without having to go through the challenges of the School of Hard Knocks. You can benefit from his wealth of knowledge and experience, enabling you to navigate the intricacies of business more effectively and make informed decisions for growth and success. So, Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
I would first love to ask you your story of how you became an entrepreneur.
So I will say that I completely fell into human resources. When I started college, I actually was going to school for nursing, and I dropped out of college. I had college debt mounting. I'm very debt averse, so I saw this mounting debt. I joined the Navy. And it took me about another 10 years to get back into a college degree program through the Navy. And it happened to be workforce education and development, with a very HR program. When I transitioned out of the Navy, I went and got my master's degree in human resource management, a master's degree in public administration. And so from pretty much that point on, I've been in HR, and slowly, I'll call it, sort of graduated up and out of HR a little bit into general operations. And about 2 years ago, July, I started my own business, really just helping other small businesses around me. I was involved with the Chamber of Commerce and had several connections in that way. Just helping them with HR because talking to them, realized they don't have an HR department. It's very rare for businesses under 50 employees to have an HR department. But they had these struggles, right? So we were constantly having these questions about, this employee is doing this thing. What should I do about it? And I thought, well, what I should do about it is charge you, because I'm giving you all of my knowledge and resources at very modest fees. But it started from there, and then I was working fractionally for another business doing operations in HR, and I realized that other business, they were screwing up a lot of HR stuff too, even though they were HR support for these tech startups out of Silicon Valley, which was exciting, right? Like the next Uber or DoorDash. And I watched them struggle and thought, no, I need to focus on this. This needs to be what I'm doing. And so I reined it back in from general operations to HR. And I've been serving clients coast to coast. It's been a fun adventure. I don't know that I necessarily started out as a purely entrepreneurial spirit. I never had lemonade stands as a kid or any of that, but it really was, I wanted to be able to offer the right size services to the right people. I wanted to be able to support good business owners who need that information and need that support, but they aren't to a place where they can afford to have their own HR people yet. So that's sort of where this grew out of, with micro business, small business owners. It's really these companies that have, I'll say less than, I call it less than 50, but ideally it's been around 30 employees seems to be the spot where suddenly like they're all doing different things and trying to take advantage of, like a handbook not very well written, and trying to take advantage of policies and maybe not even taking advantage. That sounds malicious. They're just trying to interpret what's poorly communicated to them and interpret it in a very favorable aspect, right? And so getting things cleaned up really has helped my clients settle into a comfortable way to manage their folks.
Right. Well, I know today we're going to be talking about turnover, which a lot of people don't like, that word, right? We don't want to have turnover. It's hard. You have to replace employees or, whatever the situation is. But you have a different perspective on that that we're going to be discussing today. So I would love for you first to just even say what your perspective is.
Yeah. So there's I think it's Hamlet, a quote that says, nothing is good or bad, but thinking or believing it makes it so, right? And that's a very rough, horrible quote. But the idea is we can look at people transitioning out of their employment as a terrible, terrible thing, or we can see it as an opportunity for our business. And so really it's not an either or proposition. It really is, let's analyze what your turnover looks like so that we can either say, hey, your turnover is really okay, let's use this as a selling point, or hey, you've got the wrong kind of turnover, let's fix that as well, because that's HR too.
Right. Well, I think some people may be thinking too, like, obviously, if you have a toxic employee, or someone who's no longer engaged or something, it makes sense, that it's time for them to find something they enjoy, which will then allow us to find someone who is going to enjoy that. But there are times too where you have excellent candidates. They've found, better opportunities for whatever reason, or they're moving, or, whatever happens, right? Life happens sometimes, and you're losing those, ideal candidates even too. So how do you look at that from a positive perspective?
Yeah. So I think that so much of my attitude and perspective is rooted in the military. I was in the military for 20 years, retired out. And the military always has an environment where turnover is built into the equation. I'm not sure anybody ever told me exactly why that's true, but I think that predominantly it is meant to give people an opportunity to grow and excel. And it's very rare, like you look at organizational structures, they're very like a pyramid, right? The higher up the pyramid you go, the fewer opportunities there are for you to step into that particular next role in your business. So the military has, obviously, like coast to coast around the world, the ability to shuffle and move their people around so that they can take advantage of that next promotion opportunity. And it's just going to be somewhere else. It's built in. Right? The other piece I always thought was to keep things fresh, to keep us from getting stagnant. There really is not that mindset of like we've always done things this way, because the military is always reinventing what they do. You get a commanding officer, they want to change things, they want to put their stamp on what the organization looks like, and it can be really frustrating for everybody involved, but there's nothing that looks like stagnant. This is how we do things. We do things by policy, which is a really nice thing, because you can step into a different office with different coworkers, and the policy is always the same, so you kind of know what you need to do, and then the rest of it is just the social, like figuring out where you belong in the realm of that organization. So I always came from this perspective of I've always watched people around me every 2, 4, 5 years. Everybody leaves. The entire organization is different. If you've been someplace, I think the longest I was ever at an organization was 4.5 years. In 4.5 years, I'm looking at a crew of 150 people, and 10 of us might be the same from the time that I arrived. And so that's a huge organizational change in that amount of time. But you know what? The mission gets accomplished. The job is always done well. Everybody understands what their roles are. So it isn't turnover that is problematic in terms of like, oh my gosh, we're losing money. Nobody knows how to do anything anymore. It's not that. It's how we convey that information from one to another so that the next person who steps in can take over, right? We don't have good processes and procedures in place. So when the new hire comes in, we're kind of trying to teach them, well, I think the person who was here before used to do this thing. And even worse is I've been at organizations where employees who've been there for 20, 30 years, and nobody knows what they do, right? Like you just ask Alice, oh, this thing needs done. Ask Alice, she knows how to do it. But Alice has no procedure on paper. Nobody, like if Alice gets sick or Alice decides that she's going to retire, there's no way to replicate what Alice does. And so it's that becomes like part of the problem. But if we have good structures, we can document, then that turnover is really not that toxic by itself, right? Like as long as we don't have those toxic people, poor managers who are driving people out, turnover is the thing that we need to be focused on. We need to be focused on how to get our systems, processes, and procedures in place so that the turnover is not a
Well, I definitely agree with that too, because that's one of the fears people have, though, is the loss of knowledge, right? So, but if you have everything documented on every process that is being done, so someone could step in, like you said, if say they go on vacation or again, she retires or something, then someone can look and find like step by step exactly how to follow the process and then can replicate the work. It may take a little bit more time at first because there's a little bit of a learning curve in having to look at the instructions, but at least you have instructions. Yeah. So I think that definitely will help ease the fear that we're going to be losing the expertise and the knowledge if somebody is leaving.
Yeah. So, you had asked me like, how do you get used to losing your good people? And I think that I'll call it an attitude of celebration, right? And so if we're losing people for the right reasons, my organization, again, built like a pyramid, if I know that Bob is ready to promote, but there's not an open position in this organization, we would celebrate Bob's ability to find that promotion. We'll take everything that he learned within our organization that helped him further his life, right? So part of this is still seeing people as people, that we should be happy when people are able to better take care of their families, that they are able to get a better paycheck, maybe better benefits. These are things that we should be really frustrated about. And I think there's this is sort of a mindset shift, being able to look at this as our organization supports people so that they can grow, learn, and develop. They might not stay here. Right? Realistically, they probably won't. But we can celebrate that. And if I was looking for a job and part of their sales pitch was sort of this idea of, hey, 80% of people promote within 3 years of joining our company, and 75% of them go somewhere else with a promotion. I'd be kind of excited about that idea, right? Because you already know I don't have to fake it, right? This is always these are frustrations in HR, right? Like I don't like when people have to fake being sick because they need a day off because they're burnt out. I don't like when people have to tell me like, hey, I don't have any more vacation days, but I've got a few sick days and I really want to take my kid out to Christmas shop. Like, I don't want you to lie to me about these things. I just want you to be honest. Part of you being honest is you may not stay here forever. And I think you can be okay with that, right? This idea that organizations are these monolithic things that have a pension plan and you're going to spend 20 years, get your gold watch and retire. That's not realistic anymore. It doesn't exist. The 401k is like I call it part of the tool that broke it apart. Because now as an employee, you can take that retirement plan and move wherever you want to move without losing it. You didn't lose all the time you invested in the previous company, but now you can also take advantage of the retirement plan plus the promotion plus the better payroll, right? Like, so employees have a little mobility, and it's just not real logical for employers to think that people are going to stick around for 20, 30 years. I also really got worried about people who were in, I won't call them level positions, but who got into a position and felt very okay with that for 20 or 30 years. That worries me, because the amount of complacency that exists in those places, they're rarely your best performing employees either, right? We become very tolerant of them, or people like them. I mean, like, that's usually what happens. Everybody loves this person and we wouldn't want her to go anywhere, but we also kind of know she slips up a lot and she doesn't always get her work done on time, but everybody just loves having them around. So, like, getting rid of that stagnant piece of business isn't bad either.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think too, as employers, we may not always have, like I said, an actual open position where they can move up into something that's, different and really have some totally different skills that they're developing. But I think as employers too, we could also try to find opportunities to give our staff the chance to learn so that they can potentially continue to grow in our positions. But like you said, if for some reason there's really not anything else, like they've kind of hit, that top of the S curve, let's say, it definitely is good when you can have that good relationship with your employees and encourage them, to find that opportunity. I mean, I remember years and years ago, I had someone who was working with me who had taken accounting classes, had never worked in the field. He had worked like at Costco, or I think it was Sam's Club, just handling the cash and helping count it and like documenting it, but never really did anything bookkeeping wise. And then he came and he worked for me and he learned bookkeeping and payroll and sales tax and all of those things. And I think he was with me for about 3 years. And then he got hired by USC, right? And then when he came to tell me, he's like, I'm having a really hard time deciding, right? Because I love working here. I'm like, okay, let's think about this. Small bookkeeping company or USC, where you could get your free master's degree or whatever, because, he wanted to go on and do that. I was like, that's not even an option, right? And so we were able to leave on good terms. And he was very thankful for what he did have to learn. And I was glad I was able to help launch him into something different. But a lot of times people have a hard time seeing that because they feel like, well, I've invested so much in this person and now they're leaving, right? So can you talk about maybe how they can shift that mindset to be like, I actually made a difference in this person's life and I'm able to help launch them into something else, instead of I invested all my time and they don't appreciate it and they're leaving?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I think this is it though, right? We get to choose which way we view that situation. Now, and I get it. Like, we have our hard weeks, and if somebody comes along and like, we've had a stressful week and we've been behind on a project, and somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I hate to break it to you, but I'm gonna, here's 2 weeks notice. I'm leaving. I got this job. That's this opportunity." That like, it can be hard for us to not feel like life is sort of piling on, right? But I think of it in terms of maybe like our kids. They don't really ever ask the question like, I've invested a lot in you. Like, when are you going to be, faithful and stay in the house and, pick up more slack? I mean, like, we know,
Right.
we don't ask those questions of kids. We want them to launch. And so I think inherently we sort of, like, in our society, we have this mindset built in that if we think of these people as someone that's in our charge, like, especially as leaders, somebody in our charge to help them grow, develop, and move on to what's next in their lives, and always encourage them to push the boundaries, not be comfortable. I think that a lot of what goes along with that is also encouraging them to try, encouraging them to fail and learn lessons. It's like parenting. But for some reason, when we get into the business world, we lose a little bit of that somewhere. And I'm not entirely sure, why it's hard to draw the direct connection. But I think that, like you said, right? Hey, you listen to the opportunity for this gentleman. you know that it doesn't make sense for him to stay, right? Like
Mhm.
everything is going to line up for him if he takes this opportunity. And the truth of the matter is he may not stay at USC for longer than 3 years. He might get his
Mhm.
master's degree, and he might qualify to go work in accounting at a major bank or a Fortune 500 company. Like he may use that as a leaping off point. I worked in
Mhm.
a university system for a few years while I got my master's degree. So I understand that my goal was never to teach. Largely, a university system is like that's what they're aimed for. But I was able to support them while they supported me, and when it was time for me to
Mhm.
leave, I left with more knowledge than I arrived with. That's a
Mhm.
great thing, right? So, on one hand, they celebrate me as a graduate. On the other hand, I was lost, right? So, and I remember, I remember my supervisor at the time uh, was really supportive and fantastic in that regard. It also helped that she was making a transition to a promotion within the organization about the same time that I was getting ready to move on. So for her, I'll say my transition was sort of like somebody else's problem a little bit, but I think even if she'd stayed, she just was very, very supportive. And I think that she, like in a way, was probably very crucial in helping me to develop that mindset that we can just be happy when people are able to attain more in life. And, like I think that there's, we worry about word of mouth advertising for
Mhm.
clients, but, for employee, think about the recruiting video that goes along with your former employee who said, Candy supported me. And when I had a hard decision to make, she encouraged me to make the right decision. And she gave me tools to get there, right? Like
Mhm.
that's a great recruiting message. But if you told him to stay because you'd invested time and he hadn't worked out his time, I mean, like, what's the recruiting message there, right? Like, I
Right.
tried to leave and Candy won't let me. Like, nobody wants to feel like they're stuck in their job. Like,
Mhm.
I think that's a depressing sort of feeling, feel like we're stuck where we're at. So,
Mhm.
even having the options, right? And encouraging people to be open to options that come their way, I think that's just a benefit to us business owners.
Mhm. I think sometimes maybe the feeling is because there are times where it's just even more challenging to find a replacement, right? And so it's never, an ideal time either to have to take extra time to search and interview and find those candidates. But, even in recent years, it's been harder for some people to even find employees. So, I mean, what would you say to the person then is saying, like, yes, I want to encourage my staff to grow and find those opportunities, but it's harder to find the replacements to keep my company effectively running?
Yeah, so I just I have a good client in mind who he runs it's a dry cleaning plant. It's light industrial work. You can imagine that a lot of the positions they're not minimum wage, but
Mhm.
they're blue collar semi skilled positions, and he's not necessarily paying at the top of a pay scale. He's pretty solidly in the middle. I think he is very concerned about his employees, which is why I like working with him. Because when we have these conversations, it's easy. When he and I started working together, he was working with a staffing agency because he felt like the recruiting cycle was costly. It took forever. He didn't have time. He wasn't totally confident that he was picking the right people. So he outsourced this to a staffing agency. When
Mhm.
he and I started talking, I was like, how much are you paying for the staffing agency? And he told me, and I said, I think I can save money. I think I can get you your people faster, and I think we can make this work. So we came up with a plan that supported their recruiting goals. Over the past 3 or 4 cycles, I have turnover. But over the past 3 or 4 cycles, I think our average cost to hire has been around $500. And we've had an average time to hire in the, I'll call it like the 5 range. We've had some that are as soon as 3 days, which is amazing. I mean, I even pat myself on the back about that one. And some are closer to 7, but 5 days, you know, for a time to hire $500 in 5 days, because we have the right mindset about who we're looking for. Now, I'll tell you that as I work with business owners, part of the hiring stagnation or friction that happens is from really looking for people who are unicorns, right? Like, we kind of want them to embody everything that we want in the perfect employee, and we want them also somehow to be on the low end of the pay scale and not have as much experience as we would expect. Like, we kind of want to have everything all at once. My wife and I call that putting all of our groceries in one bag. Don't make that bag heavy. And I see that with business owners a lot, right? And it causes problems in the hiring cycle. So instead of looking for, I'll call them either transferable skills, you know, in this particular instance with the blue collar work, we're not looking for people who are credentialed, you know, it might be a little different if we're looking at IT or doctors. I work with a lot of law firms. I know how long it takes to hire an attorney. So those things come with a little, you know, like with a little bit of a grain of salt, but we also expect there's much less turnover in highly compensated professional individuals. That's just typically how this works. That the closer you get to entry level, the more likely you are going to see turnover, because these people are always sort of like ear to the ground. And if I can get a new job that's, 5 miles closer and pays me 25 cents more an hour, that's a good deal all of a sudden for them, right? And really, it's $500, and they don't know what they're jumping into in terms of culture or fit, or are they going to like their coworkers? But they, that tends to be their decision-making process. I want a little more money. I want to be a little closer to home. I want to spend a little more time with my kids. I need eye insurance. I need whatever, right? And so they are always wheeling and dealing to find that next job. So I think that really fear of can we recruit needs to start with are we looking for the right people? Are we trying to find people who culturally fit that we can train, right? Because if you have the processes, systems, and procedures in place, training is really not that big of a deal. Not an incredibly long thing. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We just need you to read the book and follow the steps. And oh, by the way, like in the military, that's exactly how we did all of our work. No matter what we were doing, we had the process in hand and usually had one person reading the steps and one person doing the steps. Now, that's a little unreasonable in most businesses, but that same idea, if you have the right process, you can read it, follow it, and it always comes up with the same result every time, right? Like, you wouldn't start tax season with, I'm just going to do it this way this year. You don't do that. You have a process and a system for how to approach taxes. And the IRS has made that fairly easy because most tax forms start with block 1 and work their way down through the list, right? Like, it's all in order for you. It's meant to be a process already. But if you had somebody who's trying to just wing it every single time, then you can see how hard it is to hire the right person, no matter what they know already, right? Because we need them to know what we do inherently for them to be really effective right out of the gate. So I think that just having those systems in place, knowing what we're recruiting for, and having a really good plan for how to recruit, right? We're not going to wait for the perfect person to show up. I don't need you to wait for the perfect person. I need you to look for the good person, right? So that we can mold them, because we're going to ultimately have to mold everybody. And we can have those conversations, we can plot and plan. But when it becomes time to recruit, then it just runs smoothly, right? We have a process in place, so it runs smoothly.
Right. Perfect. Well, I know we're coming to the end of the time we have together today, so I wanted to ask if you have an offer that you would like to extend to our listeners, and how can they connect with you if they want more information?
Sure. I actually do free consultations. That's my big offer, right? Like I want to hear about the business, hear about what's going wrong, and just learn. That's really what that's meant to do. It's not meant to be a sales pitch. I want to learn as much about my clients as I can so that I can determine whether they even need it. Sometimes they do. So that's my big offer is the free consultation. The second one is just really low cost. I do a low cost audit of their HR processes. Really easy for anybody to afford, $100. If they want to get with me, it's Andrew at headsupport.com, AHEADSUPPORT.com. And yeah, that's it.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Andrew, for being a guest on my show and talking on this topic. I appreciate the time that you took to share your perspective.
Thank you, Candy. It's been fun.
And to the listener, if you enjoyed today's topic and you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact at abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.